Hi everyone, welcome to another webinar of the series from the Media Sciences Department. Today we have someone very special for you guys, someone who not only is known throughout the industry but is known throughout Pakistan for all his contributions to the world of advertising and to the world of digital arts, visual arts, and very recently in 2019 to the world of film. He is a person who's known not just for his wide knowledge of film, but also his contribution to the aesthetics of the cinema in many different ways. Today, we have someone who I find to be one of the most important people we can have in this time, and for someone who actually understands film. And we would like to welcome Saqib Malik. Thank you, Saqib, for joining us.
Thank you, Shahjehan, so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to students, and I feel very privileged to be talking to you today. As you know, I'm a follower and a fan of yours.
Thank you. I'm just glad that we've managed to have you here because I feel more than ever today students need to understand how filmmakers play such a huge role in our especially in Pakistan with the sort of nascent cinema we have with the industry that is yet to understand its full potential. And then we have someone like you who's worked in so many different ways and has given so many different sort of tangents to this industry. So, Saqib, before I think we go more further into it, let's discuss your entry into this industry. So, let's talk about how you ended up getting interested in filmmaking and even in terms of advertising. What made you come to this particular field?
You know, I was always interested in cinema, and I can trace it back almost to the time I was like 5 or 6 years old. Um, and that was the era of when Pakistani cinema or going to the cinema was very big. This was the early 70s. And so, you know, my interest in cinema began then because remember, we had no VCR, there was,
Yes.
hardly television to speak of except for PTV. Our exposure to the world was very much culturally, especially as far as cinema is concerned, as to what used to play in the cinema. English ki kuch, selected films were released, but every week there were two or three Pakistani films that were released in the cinema. So from then I've had a fascination with movie making, telling stories, and the kind of escape and the alternate reality and the wonder of cinema. Then when I obviously grew up,
Right.
I continued this interest in cinema. But when I went to seek an education, a higher education, तो मैं again बात कर रहा हूँ early 80s की, तो उस वक्त the majority of people still studied law or government service or banking or medicine. I wasn't interested in any of these, and I pursued a degree in advertising and communications in the US. I wanted to be a filmmaker, like I did not want to stay on in the US. I wanted to come back to Pakistan. And I thought कि भाई अगर मैं वहाँ से फिल्म मेकिंग की डिग्री लूँगा तो मैं यहाँ आके क्या करूँगा, क्योंकि the industry in those days was had started going downhill very rapidly. Yeah, this is during martial law years,
Mm.
but there were controls on production and censorship and all of that. And then the process of filmmaking was not very professional. It was in the hands of a few production houses, distribution houses. There's a lot of black money going into filmmaking. So I thought, if I come get a degree, how am I going to pursue that? So I just studied advertising, and I thought, okay, closest thing to that. I came back to Pakistan in '88, and luckily, um, I saw the dawn of the new the rebirth or the new birth of media culture in Pakistan and the whole media revolution and the end of martial law, which came, of course, in 1989. So I've seen that firsthand, and I was in advertising for 7 years. I started directing commercials. I was on the creative side. And then I decided, since I can't really make movies, I don't know how, what am I going to do? Like, how's it going to work out? So I started making commercials. And then I continued making commercials and later music videos. till 2019, 18, when I decided to make 𝗏𝗔. Actually, I'd been wanting to make a film since 2005 after 𝗘𝗺𝗃𝗧. But for some reason, I'd find a script, I'd throw it away, something would happen, a lot of trial and error. And finally, in 2018, I decided to make 𝗏𝗔. We went into production, and 2019 𝗏𝗔 was released. So that is a summary of my life and the way I
Yeah.
entered.
No, that was a rather concise. I think you're being very graceful and not telling us how many wonderful accolades that are to your name. But I find this journey so amusing. I mean, in the 1980s, when Pakistan, so I think up until 2000s, could not imagine a degree in filmmaking, but you were able to do it in the West in the 80s. So how did you find that sort of almost cultural shock when you must have come back? There must have been a very different sort of industry that you were coming to. I mean, what you were studying versus what you were seeing. Were you able to
No,
find any connections between the two?
not at all. I was always extremely connected to Pakistan. I was very rooted here. Even when I was in Islamabad growing up, I had gone, my parents sent me to the international school, which was the American school. So all my life, I was meeting people from all over the world. And, it
Right.
was a very international experience. So when I went to America, it wasn't a cultural shock as such. When I वापस आया, it wasn't a cultural shock. Because all through my schooling also, I was very connected with cinema. I used to get the, Urdu newspaper every day. मैं उसमें फिल्मों के इश्तिहार देखता था. Every week I'd take the wagon. ज़माने में wagons होती थी. I'd take the wagon.
Yeah.
I'd walk myself. Take the wagon, pay 50 paisas का होता था किराया from where I lived to the market. Go buy the weekly newspapers. And then I had a group of friends. I was very lucky to find like-minded group of friends, and that is really the biggest privilege you can have in life, is if you can find like-minded friends, people who understand you. They also had a love of Pakistani cinema, and even though they studied with me at the American school, they were Pakistanis. So हम लोग cinemas बकाया जाया करते थे on our own. So very rooted here. That's why I wanted to come back. So मैं जब वहाँ अमेरिका में भी था, I used to come over the holidays to Pakistan, and I was absolutely fine. When I got back, I came back to Karachi because Karachi was my first love, even though I grew up in Islamabad, and all the work was in Karachi. The whole industry was in Karachi. So I had no problems fitting in. I was absolutely fine. Now remember, I never worked in America. मुझे कोई शौक नहीं था.
Right.
मैं वहाँ काम करता था, फिर यहाँ को होता तो अलग था. But I was studying there. So I've had no kind of culture shocks as such. I've
But were
always
you able to connect what you studied with what you were seeing in the industry? क्या industry में उसी तरीके का काम हो रहा था जब आप पढ़ के आए थे, या the work here was less mediocre, was better? What sort of things did you notice when you came back?
So I can talk about that. Again, as far as film was concerned, so I studied advertising and communications. That was my major. As far as film is concerned, so I never came and joined the film industry here, right? Of course, I was
Yes.
very aware. I was very aware how it functioned, but I didn't join it. I joined advertising, and the world of advertising was pretty well established in Pakistan. You had
Yes.
multinational companies even then, a lot of good Pakistani companies, and advertising was always a bit of a, snobby or a little elitist world, right?
Yes.
Because we were dealing with companies and all of that. तो उसमें मुझे कोई इतना issue नहीं हुआ. Obviously, आप अमेरिका से आते हैं, you see the world there, and then I did internships and stuff, and so it was very different the way, the scale at which people operated, the scale at which people thought. But advertising, it was very easy to settle in. And I remember, many just recently when I saw Mad Men, I'm sure a lot of people have seen Mad Men, which is this terrific serial on the world of advertising in the US, on Madison Avenue in the 1950s and 60s. And I tell you, in the late 80s, Pakistan was exactly like that. Computers were just beginning to come in.
Really?
Everything was hand done. We'd present concepts on, on hand-drawn boards in meetings. Even the typography used to be, वो type उसके पास जाती थी, फिर वो with a scalpel, it would be touched up, and if anything had to be changed, it was a
Right.
nightmare because everything had to go to the press, and there were press deadlines. So it was very much like that. So there were no issues. The only thing I all figured out very early on, and I think that is our greatest weakness, is that as a nation we happen um, we don't do critical thinking. We self-censor.
Mm.
Telugu zamane mein, though I
Yes.
can understand coming of martial law and a very strict time of 𝗘𝗪𝗧𝗪 and that whole era where the arts, the free thought, independent thinking, all of that was heavily suppressed. लेकिन till this day I feel कि हम लोग खुल के सोचते नहीं हैं. We don't allow ourselves the freedom because we still, there are too many fears, there are too many things telling us not to do that, to stop ourselves from
Very
thinking
true.
or stop ourselves. So basically, we're very hypocritical. Actually, we do everything, but at the same time, we are, when it comes to putting ourselves out there, we hold back. And I think that lack of creativity in our system, whether it's advertising or whether it's any other field, fashion or God knows what, filmmaking, is because of our own desire to censor ourselves and to pretend, a lot of things that we're actually not. Whereas we're very creative. We are the most creative, innovative, um, amazing group of people in this country, very diverse, but हम अपने आप को रोक देते हैं. And that is our biggest flaw and our
So, Saqib,
loss.
this just made me think. So, you're talking about an era even before the martial law when films such as, like we could have films such as 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗪𝗏 coming out and talking about things which, up until now, it's so difficult to talk about in various ways. We had films that were putting out international narratives, like something like 𝗪𝗏𝗧𝗪𝗏, which talks about the Palestinian conflict, right? So, we got films that were doing so many different sort of narratives. What do you think went wrong? What do you think completely made us go off the tracks?
Well, the 60s, when the film industry was coming into its own in the late 50s and early 60s, cinema, and also remember India, cinema
Yes.
was highly respected, and a lot of very, very talented people joined the cinema, whether it was writers. I mean, Manto was a screenwriter, right?
Yes.
And Faisal also wrote for movies. There were, amazing illiterate people, Khwaja Khurshid Anwar. I mean, so many people in undivided India, as well as then when the Pakistani industry took root, who joined movies. And so those people brought with them a certain work ethic. Those people had an amazing um, ideals of nation building because we had nothing. So the industry really was made up of scratch. No, it was made from scratch by people who migrated from India. Mind you, Lahore was a huge film center before partition, and
Yes.
uh, Lahore and Calcutta. These were the three centers of film in India pre-partition. So Lahore was hugely influential, but then all the studios broke down in 47 और उसके बाद फिर दोबारा rebuilding हुई थी. So till the 60s, there was great spirit. A lot of very hardworking, enterprising, educated people came into this field. And even though there wasn't Ayub Khan's era, obviously he was a dictator, martial law dictator, it wasn't an era of um, क्या कहते हैं, a lot of freedom, but
Mm.
it was relatively freer in terms of censor morals issues.
Right.
The big issue was that we need to stay in the American ambit and not become a
With the-
part of Cold War and with the Soviet Union. So those were the issues. So if you had anybody who was talking about communism or workers' rights or unions in films, that was a problem. Otherwise, things were allowed to flourish. एंड देन आपका आया प्रॉब्लम.
Right.
अच्छा, फिर पाकिस्तान का जो सिनेमा था, it was also divided into three areas. There was Lahore, there was Karachi, and there was Dhaka. Now all three centers brought in a very different sensibility, and that sensibility created a very nice mix of ideas as well as talent. Karachi was urban, Lahore had a huge film history, and Dhaka had its own very unique film language and its own culture and its own tonality. 71 में जब Dhaka, when we lost East Pakistan and it became Bangladesh, we lost a huge film center and a huge reservoir for a pool of talent. Karachi में भी फिल्में बंद studios started closing down, so everything got settled in Lahore. Then came PTV. Once PTV came in the late 60s and by the early 70s it had entrenched itself, we had a very interesting cultural dichotomy. The world of TV and the world of cinema. The world of cinema was seen as something that's larger than life, जहाँ पैसे देख के चीज़ देने जाते हैं, where you would find your fantasies come true. TV was all about art and reality. So ये एक dichotomy बन गई. TV वाले कहते थे कि would turn their noses up at film. Film वाले would say, oh, ये तो TV drama है. So that world became, and so the more your intelligentsia gave preference to television. Whereas in the beginning, your intelligentsia was also invested in film. Uske baad, then during Bhutto's time, again, there was relative freedom in cinema. And that's why, for example, Rangila, who was a great satirist, made 𝗙𝗃𝗓𝗏. And of course, he also made a film called 𝗓𝗏𝗓𝗏 aur 𝗏𝗃𝗏, which was a parody on Bhutto. And that film was banned. So, that area was relatively freer for censorship. But again, censorship meant that you could touch on social taboos, you talk about relation, you could talk about cultural norms, vulgarity, so to say, or or that kissing or nudity, that wasn't an issue at this point.
Right.
So there was a relative freer atmosphere that you could survive in. I'm not saying there was kissing in Pakistani cinema, but generally free. But also by this time, Pakistan went through a big transformation, a big cultural and economic transformation. As the petrodollars started coming in and the Gulf states opened up to Pakistani labor, suddenly there was a whole new flourishing economy. A lot of your smaller villages turned into smaller cities turned into big towns. There was a big migration, rural to urban. Cinemas cropped up. The VCR came. So your audience changed. Cinema-going audience started becoming much more working class because the big business was in the working class audiences. And your intelligentsia and your elite urban classes, who have traditionally were the ones to push quality, went to the VCR to watch Indian films. So that is when the qualitative levels of our cinema began to, and the aesthetic levels of our cinema began to fall. Because the audience had changed, the demands of that audience were very different. So once a film like 𝗪𝗧 𝗏 became a super duper hit, all of the Punjabi industry just started making films that followed that formula. उसके बाद जब VCR आया, तो जब Indian movies आ गई, तो एक तो हमारा पोल खुल गए. A lot of Pakistani movies used to be charbaz of Indian films, that people never knew. और दूसरा ये कि people would prefer watching a latest Indian film of much better quality, renting it out for 10 rupees in their own home. So cinema going became less of a passion, less of an outing. The quality of cinemas themselves dropped. The quality of films dropped. So all of this was happening. Then was martial law came in, and then it was a slow decline from there. Yes, there were a few ups in the 90s when we had co-productions and a whole new breed of younger filmmakers and actors like Reema Ali, Shan, Sahiba, Rambo, ye sare aaye, Madhya Shah, Saima. But then, it just couldn't last. And then I think by the early 2000s, the industry completely collapsed. And लोग कहते हैं कि इंडियन फिल्मों ने मार दिया. Not at all. जो फिल्में हमारी इंडस्ट्री बना भी रही थी ना, वो हमारी ऑडियंस खुद नहीं देखने आ रही थी. So the working class audience, the blue collar audience for whom the films were being made for, they stopped going to the cinema because the stuff that was being produced was such rubbish and it was constantly repetitive. And then there came a point where maybe we were just producing 3 or 4 films a year. And
Yeah, hardly.
we had to open up Indian films. So Indian films opened up slowly but surely. There was an interest in revival of going to the cinema, as a result of which new cinemas started coming up. We started making new films. And then, of course, there were some visionaries like 𝗘𝗺𝗃𝗍𝗳 sahab, who made 𝗘𝗺𝗃𝗧𝗏 and other people who, proved that, yes, there is an audience out there for quality Pakistani films, and there is an audience out there that wants to see its own stories on the big screen. And then,
But
so
Saqib,
moved
so
from
speaking of
there.
someone like Shoaib Mansoor, and you just spoke about this new wave, as we call it. But still, I mean, this is, and I'm sure you've also heard this many, many, many times, more than I have, that oh, in fact, we still haven't really gotten to a revival. I mean, the term revival in itself makes no sense. Do you think that it makes sense? Have we, in fact, gotten through a revival, or are we still stuck somewhere in the middle, in some limbo?
Well, right now the world is in total limbo. We don't know what the future of cinema is. We don't know where our stories are going to be told. As Pakistanis, we're in real dire straits because we have the voices, we have the talent, and we have the know-how, but we don't have the cultural space anymore. आपके ड्रामे तो बन रहे हैं, but
Right.
unfortunately we don't have the streaming platforms. So where are we going to tell the stories? Where is the way future for us? So अभी तो हम limbo में हैं. I would say it wasn't so much a revival. I would say that um, we were in a testing ground. Um, we still had not found a viable economic formula where we could make films and say, okay, this works. Only when you have that formula can you say that, okay, we're on a revival. There wasn't that. अभी भी जो फिल्में लोग बना रहे थे out of personal passion बना रहे थे, large media houses बना रहे थे, so large media houses can then make a film and then they share the burden of costs on a variety of platforms.
Yes.
They're producing it themselves, they're distributing it themselves, they have worldwide rights to it themselves, so they can't really lose. Independent producers were having a huge problem. I was an independent producer, and ask me. Even though I made a fairly successful film, it was a nightmare financially, and you don't know how to raise money. We don't know how to make our money back. There's a lot of systems that aren't in place. So until that economic formula is set, there was no revival. Yes, what there was there was a testing ground. There was passion, and there was the same kind of zest, like perhaps there was in the early 60s. Okay, we can do it. Let's put our all and set a new foundation. We were trying to set a new foundation. There wasn't a revival.
Right. So, you just spoke about something that we as teachers and our students also talk about a lot, which is economic freedom in terms of filmmaking. Now, a lot of these filmmakers, these students who are learning to make films, SZABIST almost graduates about 50 to 60 graduates a year in film. And, these students then go about looking for producers, and finding producers is a nightmare on its own. So how does
Yeah,
one, where do they even find someone to make them make a film?
I so agree with you, and this is the tragedy of the way it is in our field. Particularly when you study cinema, or actually any performing arts, or acting, or anything, or art for that matter, fine art, is what do you do after you do get your degree? That's not a Pakistani
Yes,
problem, that's a global problem.
of course.
The problem is more because you don't have film funds, you don't have corporations or different support systems to get students to start participating in different programs or scholarships or initial funds to make their movies. Nor is there a vibrant market. I mean, if you make a film, where are you going to put it on YouTube? How are you going to cover your cost? और अगर आप कहीं जॉब पे जाते भी हैं तो आप क्या करेंगे? There's just not enough jobs. We're producing a lot of film students right now, but we're not producing enough jobs in the industry. When I was studying, when I was say 20 years old, a very long time ago, so there was no film school in Pakistan. There was nothing. I mean, you couldn't study film. If I wanted to, कहीं I don't know कहाँ पे कहीं भी नहीं थी. ये तो अब amazing कि हर institution, every institution worth its name has to offer a film school, and there's so much interest. So a lot of young students ask me, what do we do? And my response to them is, look, one of the ways is that you go and do what I did, which is try and find advertising production houses, become a producer there, do an internship, um, become an art, look at becoming an art director there, look at becoming an AD there. You can join the big channels and see what they have to offer. But वहाँ पे भी problem ये है कि when you're starting off, you're treated like you're worthless,
Of
right?
course.
अब तो आपको पता है कि आपको जॉब करना है, आपको इस हॉस्पिटल में जॉब मिल जाएगा. फिल्म मेकर बेचारा क्या करेगा? वो फिल्म बनाना भी चाहे तो वो लगाए कहाँ? There is no a system of awards or rewards or festivals. So how would you do what you want to do? I really wish I had the answer to that. But my answer to that is that you have to keep trying. Sooner or later, you will find a niche.
Right.
My best bet is television or advertising, because filmmaking तो अभी बहुत ही small और रुका हुआ है. And if you can, then just continue making your own little films. Have your own YouTube page. There can be a little filmmakers collective where films can be put up. You, as a 𝗙ABIST, can have a film collective page where students from 𝗙ABIST can keep putting up their films even after they've left 𝗙ABIST, right?
That's
They can be intercollegiate, inter-university student film festival, which all the top universities can do together, and I'm sure that you will find sponsors. The mobile companies will be very happy to do that. It's just about somebody taking that initiative and saying, okay, we're going to collect all these people. So those will provide platforms, and the most important thing is to find a platform. मैं हमेशा किसी को कहता हूँ, whoever starting out, make your reel. People want to see what you can do. Don't expect that anything will be handed to you on a platter in this field. If you want anything, you have to make a reel. Don't look at money. Go out, make your short film, make that music video. Even if you have to put in a little bit of money in it, do it. But that becomes your own, so to say, bank balance. You show that. Look, this is what I do. This is what I can do, and it leads to other things. So don't give up. Keep working. You're a filmmaker now. You have a phone. You can edit on your phone. You can make great little stories
absolutely.
and just put them up, share them, put them up on little your own YouTube pages, and that's how a lot of talent is now being discovered. That's the way of the future, at least in Pakistan.
And I think, Saqib, what you're talking about here is passion, right? Because unless you don't have passion, a person wouldn't realize that even a phone is basically your way to make a film. So, I have seen this recently is a lot of students have passion, but they sort of lack the understanding of how to translate that passion into proper filmmaking. So, for a person who's just about to go into filmmaking, what are some pointers that you definitely think they should know beforehand, before they even think of shooting a movie, some things that they should know?
Well, first of all, it is an act of passion. I would say sometimes it's a crime of passion, making a film, because you really are committing a crime with yourself. देखिए जब आप डॉक्टर बनने जाते हैं या इंजीनियर बनने जाते हैं, it doesn't require a whole lot of passion. But for film, to survive this field, or as an athlete, an artist, you have to have incredible passion and belief in your own self and in your art, right? As a filmmaker, you're selling your art and you're selling your voice. So first of all, you have to have incredible patience. You have to have incredible passion. You have to put everything else aside. बाकी जब आप कहते हैं what are some pointers when you want to go and make a film, भाई it depends कौन सी फिल्म बनाने जा रहे हैं आप. अगर आप एक शॉर्ट फिल्म बनाने जा रहे हैं, उसके रूल्स बहुत डिफरेंट हैं. अगर आप एक इंटरनेट के लिए अपना सोशल मीडिया के लिए या किसी यूट्यूब के लिए फिल्म बना रहे हैं, दैट्स डिफरेंट. अगर आप किसी म्यूजिक वीडियो बना रहे हैं, दैट्स डिफरेंट. आई वुड से always have a good idea, no matter how you try to be unique. Try to make sure that whatever it is that you're doing that hasn't been done before, or even if it is done before, do it differently, because that's the way you're going to get noticed. So your idea is of key importance, and how you translate that idea. It's two things: the thought and the execution. One of them has to be a little different if you want to be noticed. If you're going to do the same thing that everybody else is doing, then there's a lot of people doing that. This already exists. So one, willpower, patience, passions, originality, and then resources are very difficult to muster, but then you try and pull as many favors as you can, and that's the way you do it. And if sometimes you have to barter, if you might get some friend of yours to act for you, but you do them some other kind of favor, maybe you shoot something
Yes.
for them later. It's about giving and use all your resources, and you together and be fearless and go out there and do it and put it together. I could not have been saying this to a generation before us or two generations before us, but I can
Very
say this
true.
generation of filmmakers now. You just take your phone, shoot it, and put it up. How you're going to be received is going to be based on how original and how honest your work is, how your voice translates to others.
Right. I think
And it can
that's
be
great advice for these students.
2 minute film, it can be a 1 minute film, it can be a 30-minute film, it can be a 10-minute film.
Absolutely.
But and a lot of times, it's the era of do it yourself.
Very
If
true.
you can't, if your one page is not being followed, find 20 filmmakers in 20 different institutions, 200 filmmakers in 20 different institutions. Put up a Pakistan Film Students Collective page on YouTube. Everybody puts in their work there. You'll start getting, it'll become a buzz. Other students will start getting to see that. Not the ones who are only in film. 38% of Pakistani population is under the age of 18. We have a
Yeah.
lot of young people, and people are hungry for content. That's what all people do now. लोग कहते हैं लोग फिल्में कम देखते हैं, मैं कहता हूँ लोग तो पागल हो गए, अपने फोनों से तो हटते ही नहीं है. जितना हम कंटेंट अब कंज्यूम
Bilkul.
करते हैं, हमने कभी नहीं किया है. We constantly need new content 24/7. So, as content makers or as storytellers, your futures are very bright. Yes, institutionally, to get that job and to get regular money, that may be tough, but everybody wants to see what you can do. So remain positive, don't give up, and if you aren't being given the opportunities, create those opportunities yourself.
Great. So I think, Saqib, you are a big example of this as well. A major example of the fact that of DIY, of do it yourself. You ended up making a film which, in 2019 was considered one of those very unique films to come out. I mean, you weren't following any tropes that were already in the industry or people expected. You had a film which came as almost like a breath of fresh air. So let's talk a bit about Baji. How did that end up happening? How much time did it take you? How much effort, and which I'm sure tons of effort, but a few words from your own self on the film.
Like I said, 2004 to make a film, और मैंने कुछ 5-6 scripts लिखवाई और खुद collaborate किया, and I toss them in the bin. Afterwards, thinking, okay, I'll just put them aside. Something would go wrong, or I would realize they weren't good. Then, because I always loved cinema and I always loved film, so I said, okay, let's make a film about the world of cinema. And I just found that we were going through a very interesting cultural moment in Pakistan, which was the end of an era and the beginning of a new era. And the end of the era was Lollywood and a whole, world of cinema. And the new world of cinema and the new world of culture and the new world of celebrity culture and the new world of social media was very different in that world. And I said, how interesting, I have natural conflict here, right? What good is your story without conflict? I mean, you have to have good
Of
conflict.
course.
That is the crux of the story. And
Of course.
I realized we are at a really interesting moment. And what plays my story at this moment with characters who are torn between that and that. And that's basically it. And then one thing led to another, and I decided, okay, this is the film I'm going to make. And nobody wanted to finance me, obviously, because I wasn't making a male-oriented, youthful comedy, or no comedy thriller or a comedy drama. Nor was I making a female-oriented VP in the sense, the traditional sense, where it's a romantic love
Yes.
story that's focused on called women's cinema, so to say. Um, so I wanted to tell a very thrilling story, but at the same time, a film that also paid homage to the world of cinema that I had grown up on and that I loved, and what people considered cinema here. People still consider cinema here something that you can go and have a great time at, listen to songs, feel excited, and have a fantastical experience. So I wanted to pay homage to that, but I still wanted to film to be culturally relevant at this moment and also be relevant to this audience. So I took on a lot on my plate. But Bahral, I decided the only way to do it is for me to do it myself. So I put in all my money, all my very own hard-earned money, and I said that's the only way to do it, and I did it. And like I said, um, I cast. My cast was excellent. I was very lucky to have a dream cast, but none of them were big, sellable stars. They're all actors, excellent actors. So it was
Very
an
true.
ensemble cast, and I took a genre that was very offbeat. I took an offbeat cast, and I was petrified that how is this film going to work out, and I kind of became numb. मैंने कहा मैं कर रहा हूँ तो बस अब कर रहा मैंने कूद मार दिया I've jumped off into the sea and I don't know कि किनारा किधर है. I just got to keep swimming. I don't know where it's going to be. Until the time the film was released, I was so numb that I don't even remember any of it. I don't remember the reviews, the premiere, everything. But I do remember one thing that when the film got censored, the censor report of it, लाहौर में जो सेंसर बोर्ड के चेयरमैन हैं उन्होंने रिपोर्ट दी कि नहीं ये फिल्म तो बहुत अच्छी नहीं है बुरी है और इट्स नॉट अ गुड disappointment. So my distributors got really panicky and they were like, "Fuck, this is like sorry fudge. This is going to be a problem." And then the first review that I got for the film was by a blogger or a writer for the Express Tribune who gave the film 0 out of 5. He said it's not a film, it's a joke. So I'm telling you this. So I was like, okay. But lo and behold, I once the film got released, people understood it, and people
Yes.
started viewing it and purely on word of mouth. And then, of course, it got a lot of amazing reviews as well. The film became a hit, and it became the first weekend. People were skeptical because किस type की film है. People were intrigued by the trailer and all, but किस type की film है, क्या होगा, मीरा है, साकिब ने क्या film बनाई है, इसमें मुजरे भी हैं और इसमें ये भी है, और this is not like the cool new cinema of the urban yuppie audience. But somehow I think it got a hold of people's imaginations. And by the second week, it did fantastic. Third week, it did fantastic. And then the film continued to do really well. And believe it or not, it was still running in cinemas. अभी जो बीच में gap हुआ था when the movie theaters were opened up again for these
Yes.
3-4 period back in Feb, it was still running in cinemas. And then, of course, the
Oh, wow.
film got called to a lot of festivals. And अभी भी the Shanghai Cooperation Council का एक festival है in Dushanbe where the film is going. I'm also going to go there in May, end of
Amazing.
June. So I would say that I dared. I put all my fears aside and did what I believed in. Yes, I was very privileged that I could afford to do it because I spent over 30 years in advertising. But
Yeah.
yeah, I dared to do it and ho gaya, for better or worse.
And I think more than privilege, it's your hard earned and your mehnat, which was there for so many years. I mean, if it wasn't for your 30 years into the industry, this film may or may not have happened. So it's a kudos to you for being able to stick in this industry and make it what it is today. I mean, it is due to people like you who've been a part of this industry and have basically carved it out. So I think, as I keep saying, you're too graceful. You don't like to actually say the things that you added to this industry. But Sakib, my question is also with something that you just said, which is about critique and about critics just going out and saying, okay, oh, this film is a dud, or this film is this or that, and then putting out a sweeping statement like 0 stars. So how does that, do you feel, affects the filmmaker, and do you feel that it's justifiable?
Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes, I can hear you.
Um, so there is a huge responsibility, but these days everybody's a critic because the way we gain source information now is very different. Before, you used to source information from the newspaper, and newspaper had certain standards to meet, and of course, it would hire people who met those standards. Up to everybody is a critic, and everybody puts out, whether you're a blogger, whether you're an influencer, everybody has a point of view, and everybody thinks that they're king, and everybody thinks they're God. And that does influence people, and it requires a lot of responsibility. But I think fundamentally the parameters still stay the same. In order to be able to critique something, you have to know something about that field. You have to know something about that discipline. You have to then understand what it is that that piece of work is trying to do within that discipline. Um, Whether you liked it or not is not relevant, right? Films are not about whether a person likes it or not. A film is trying to do many different things and works at any story or any piece of work is trying to communicate at many different levels, at a political level, at a social level, at a meta level, referencing film. It could be dealing with so many different things, and it needs to be read. Every work needs to be read, meaning interpreted along many different lines. So
Yes.
पाकिस्तान में ये होता है कि भाई आपको फैशन का कुछ पता नहीं है, आप फैशन forget the fashion designers, उनकी तो कहानी अलग है, but about fashion critics. Fashion critics a lot of times, or film critics or TV critics, a lot of times what innate become a critic. You have to know something about that field. You have to know, and then you have to support what you're saying with
Yes.
stuff. You can't just say that it's shit. But why is it shit? I mean, give a good, logical
Mm.
explanation for why it's shit. And I think that
Mm.
becomes very irresponsible. And but I think ultimately, by now, access is so easy that ultimately, if your work is good, or if your work is worthy enough, it will reach its audience. At least it will reach the audience it is made out for. Baji was not a film for everyone. Baji was not a film meant for the 100% of that audience. It was a film meant for people with a certain mindset. It was a film
Yes.
for people with certain sensibilities. And I wanted it to reach those people. And at the end of it, it did. So it doesn't matter what somebody said. अब तो मैं जाके वो पढ़ता हूँ तो मैं हंसता हूँ, and I'm laughing at the idiocy of that writer who gave me that review, because it just goes to show what an nincompoop he was, and he has no understanding of cinema.
Mm.
Um, I'm not saying Baji was perfect. Baji had a lot of flaws. It was my first film, big learning lesson for me in script writing and editing, so many things to learn. And hopefully, if I ever make a film again, I learn from that. But क्या कहते हैं, it wasn't perfect, but ban gayi, and I'm glad people liked it, or at least the audience.
I'm glad that people like us were able to understand it. I mean, if not everyone, but at least people who have a film background, students. I can very happily tell you that we've had tons of students who went on and seen that film and have commended it for its aesthetics, which are some things that these people can understand. So, in a way, I think the film it really did get to its audiences, and the audiences were people who are well aware of what film should be and how
Yes,
the
of
film should be made.
thanks, thank you. All of you, is good to hear that.
So, Sakib, one thing though, out of this, do you feel that although even at SZABIST and many other universities in Pakistan which teach film, we teach them film theory, we teach them history of cinema, should we then also start teaching them the art of critique?
Of course, absolutely. And I think that's a really good thing to do. In fact, when you have your own student film exercises or whatever, actually, not even that, show film, and then because that will generate discussion more than anything else. And that's the best thing about being a student, is to be able to sit in a forum and to discuss and to be mentored by a teacher and curated, so that those discussions lead to something positive. So I think film criticism is a very, very important thing, and certainly if not as a class, it should be an exercise every now and then, where you see a film and then you not only students critique it and talk about why they're saying that, but also you take critics, renowned critics, whether it's, you
Yes.
know, in क्या नाम था, KL, how did you pronounce the last name? Anyway,
who's
like great, and see how they looked at films. And there are many ways to criticize a film. One is you can criticize it aesthetically, you can critique it in terms of its socio-political context, you can critique
absolutely
it in terms of ecology. There are so many ways of critique as well. Because what did I say at the beginning? Critical thinking, to be able to
absolutely
dissect something and look at it in a 360-degree manner, and to see how every information that is coming to us, how is it ideologically driven, what are the secret messages in it, what are the ways that it's being told, how do we think critically, so that we don't just follow. If somebody, you say something to me, I think, okay, what does he mean, why does he mean it, why is he saying it like this, and just listen to what you're saying based on my preconceived notions. So yes, you're dead on, it must be done.
I think we do in many ways teach a lot of different sort of like ways to analyze visual text, but I think like what you're also saying makes complete sense that with even with students looking at contemporary cinema, they need to understand how to critique
Right.
and understand all of that as well, because I feel history तो उनको समझ आती है, contemporary आप उसको किस तरीके से critique करते हैं, that's very important at this point. So Saqib, we are
No, it's very,
almost heading to, yeah.
because remember, if you, a lot of your filmmaking students can also end up being writers. They can
Very
start
true.
writing blogs on film. They can do so much. So it's being going through film doesn't just mean that कि आप कैमरा लेकर फिल्म बनानी है. आप एडिटर भी बन सकते हो, प्रोड्यूसर भी बन सकते हो, राइटर भी बन सकते हो, क्रिटिक भी बन सकते
Very
हो.
true. Very true. I mean, I am an example. I mean, don't want to plug myself in, but I am a graduate of SZABIST, and I did end up, studying film and then going into journalism. So for so many people, that should also serve as an example that because you studied film, you can actually go into critique and you can actually study those theories and apply those into your articles and into the things you're writing. I hope that more students understand that.
You're a living
That's
example of some of a.
It's very true, very true. So, Saqib, just something now that we're heading towards the end to discuss. So, a lot of new students, prospective students, want to join film. Almost every year, we have some of the largest numbers of people joining the media sciences program for a film cluster. So, what do you think these students who are coming in now? What should they have in mind when they're going in for a program which is on filmmaking? What are the things that they should bring to a program?
um, passion, a willingness, a story, and they have to be very clear why they want to come and join filmmaking. When you want to become a doctor, you're not doing it because you necessarily want to make money, you want to help humanity, or you're really intrigued by what goes on inside your body. If you want to be a filmmaker, be intrigued by what goes on in your head and what goes on into other people's heads, and that you want to come out of it telling stories, you want to be communicators, you want to be content creators. That's it, and that's the best way that you can do it. You're making a profession out of your art.
Very true.
My battery is going to run out any minute.
Very, very. Oh, okay. No, no, we're ending anyway. Saqib, I think it was a pleasure getting you here. I'm so happy that you were able to join us. Thank you so much. And I hope that the students learned from you because I surely did.
Thank you. It was a privilege, and good luck, boys and girls. It's tough out there, but don't give up. Remember, you have what a lawyer, a banker, or an accountant doesn't have. You have the power to influence people with the stories that you tell and with your thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you, Saqib.
Take care.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone, for joining us. Bye. Thank you.